Hi guys, I'm Andrea, and today I thought I'd do my November wrap-up. And in the month of November, I think I read 9 books, and I had 4 books for nonfiction November, so I guess I'll start with those. The first book I read for nonfiction November was Don't Kill the Birthday Girl, Tales from Her Allergic Past by Sandra Beasley, and it looks a little bit like this. Sandra is a really funny writer. She interjects comedy and humor into the darkest situations, and she doesn't shy away from how her food allergies have affected like every aspect of her life. She goes from her social life to her professional life to her sex life. So it's kind of a very interesting point of view to read, and I really enjoyed the book. So yeah. The second book I read was The Third Wave, a volunteer story by Alison Thompson, and it looks a little bit like this. It's a little tiny book, and I read the little books first. She was very involved in the volunteer efforts after the 2004 tsunami / earthquake and the Haiti earthquake as well. It's a little bit over 200 pages, but Alison does such a good job describing the visual elements of her piece. She goes into such vivid detail about what she saw in terms of just horrific imagery that I cannot get out of my head as a reader. So I can't imagine for her as the actual person experiencing it. She describes bodies and torn down buildings and just destruction, and it's so jam-packed into this book. So yeah, it was a pretty good read, very interesting and mind-opening. The third book I finished was The Name of the Title, an autobiography by Fink, Capra, and I say kind of finished because I didn't completely get through all of it because other books got in the way. That sounds like such a bad answer, but it's the truth. Fink, I thought he is super interesting to read, but I think part of the reason why I wasn't as engaged perhaps is because some of the language reminded me of academic language. So it kind of gave me a weird deja vu sense back into college, and I was like, no. No, but it's cool to see how he made a name for himself and was able to succeed in the Hollywood studio system, which applause to him. And the fourth book I read for nonfiction November was A Diary of Frida Kahlo, an intimate self-portrait. And I just thought the whole entire thing was so interesting because Frida, she interjected a lot of artwork into her own journaling skills. So it was kind of felt like almost a bullet, I don't want to say bullet journal, but I'm going to say bullet journal because there's so much doodles and artworks mixed with like writing and stuff. And it was kind of cool to see because I'm a very big doodler myself. To see somebody else being successful, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I liked learning more about her. It gave me a better sense of her soul and what was inside her head. So yeah, those are my nonfiction November books, but I did read 2 more nonfiction books in the month of November, and the first one was You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, a memoir by Sherman Alexie, and I already talked about this book in my previous video, but one thing I could add on to it is that Sherman, what I appreciated about his writing is in the first few pages, he expresses to the audience that this is a book from his memories, it's a memoir, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like the objective truth or things that happened like in reality, but they happened in his mind, so it's his truth. And I don't know, I just appreciate when an author puts such candor into his own writing and work. So yeah, that was that book. And then the other nonfiction book I read was Ghosts of the Tsunami, Death and Life in Japan's Disaster Zone by Richard Lloyd Perry, and it looks a little bit like this. It's also a very thin book, and another tsunami / earthquake aftermath book, and oh my god. The Third Wave, I was able to read it in pretty much all one sitting. It didn't really it bothered me, but the graphic scenes, I felt I could live through them and just could continue reading. But in this book, I don't know, it takes place, most of the book, in the Okinawa elementary school where a bunch of kids and teachers died in, and it goes through the parents' point of view, and I just thought that was so heartbreaking, and for me it was really hard to read. And the visuals described of like kids' feet sticking out of the mud, and like these there's just one specific scene where this mother, she finds her daughter in the elementary school like gym, like that's where they kept the bodies, and she describes seeing her daughter full of mud. Her entire body was just covered in this like thick layer of mud. Like there's mud in her nose, mud in her eyes, mud in her ears, and she didn't have anything to clean her with, and so she licked her daughter's eyes and skin to get her clean, and that just really impacted me as a reader. And just hearing those kinds of stories, I had to step away a few times from the book and collect my thoughts. It's really good, it's very well written, but it's very hard to read. Besides those nonfiction books, I also read a few fiction books. I read Bloodline by Claudia Gray, and it's like from the Star Wars universe, well, the new universe. Bloodline takes place about 6 years before The Force Awakens, and it follows Leia's career from a senator, and we get know a little bit more about her thoughts on her planet being destroyed and her thoughts about Han and Luke and her son. So it's really interesting to read about her, and you get a little bit about the beginnings of the First Order. I think reading a book about Leia is always worth it for me. I love Leia. So yeah, that was a very enjoyable read. I also read Genuine Fraud by E. Lockhart, and I got this for Black Friday, so it's a signed copy. Yay! I love signed copies, and I think I'm gonna do a different video on this book because I had a lot of thoughts about it, but I guess I can say it's like a murder mystery plot suspense book. It reminds me, if you guys have seen Memento, it reminds me of Memento, reminds me of Gone Girl, but I'll go more into it in a different book, in a different video. And the last book I read was Drive by James Salas, and I love the film Drive. I'm obsessed with the film Drive. I wrote like a 20-page academic paper on the film Drive, so I thought it was time for me to read it's like a little Pulp Fiction, it's a novella, noir novella. At times it was a little bit jarring because the writing is non-linear, so I had to get used to skipping around in time points without having like a proper warning that you're going to be skipping around. So it's kind of hard in that way, and certain characters don't have real names, so it's kind of jarring at times. It's a good companion piece to the film, and the film is a good companion piece to the book, so I would definitely recommend it if you're a fan of noir or if you're a fan of the film. So yeah, that was my number wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you next time. Bye!